Let's move on to tip 2. Start learning commonly used tools. All right, so this is a really big one. Basically, I want to show you guys some of the tools that we're going to be using here on the left side of the screen, and then we're going to show you some of the options that come along with these tools. So here's my toolbar right here on the left, and I have a lot of different tools. Now, Photoshop is really good because it tends to rank things based on use. So the tools towards the top tend to be the tools you use a little bit more. The tools on the bottom you really don't use as much. So it's a good idea whenever you're in Photoshop, just if you start from the top down, you'll be doing all right. So we're going to start with basically the most commonly used tools, and we're just going to give a quick overview of all of these, and then if you guys have any questions in the audience, we've got a little bit of time to jump into more detail if you do have any questions. Okay, well, we're going to start up here with our selection tools, and with each of these I'm going to try to show you a couple of good tips and things like that. So our selection tools, we have a marquee selection tool. We have a rectangular or elliptical marquee. Basically, these make selections, and we're going to be jumping into selections in a later tip, but these are your ways in which you can make a selection, and the basic idea with a selection is once it's made, let's say I decide to paint with the brush tool, I'll paint with green. The only thing that I can do right now is I can only paint inside of that selection. So even if I'm trying to paint, you can see on my entire document right now, it's only going to happen in my selection. So anytime you need to be restricted to just a certain area in your image, selections are the way to go. All right, so we have our marquee selection tool. Down from it is our elliptical marquee tool. You can create an ellipse. It's awesome. If you want to maintain the correct aspect ratio, if you want to keep this either as a square or a circle, you're going to want to hold down the Shift key. And that's just going to make sure that it's going to, in this case, it'll keep it a circle. Now, oftentimes, I want to select out her face. Like, I want to create a circle around her face. So I'm going to start here, and then I do this, and I'm like, man, I missed her face. Do you guys ever do that, where you like miss what you're trying to, you're like, dang it, this is not good. Well, there's a really awesome keyboard shortcut that you can use while you're making your selection, and that's the space bar. So the space bar is going to allow you to move your selection while you're making it. Check that out. I'm making it, I can adjust it and move it and continue to make it, and I haven't taken my hand off my cursor yet. So I can make my selection, let go, and then my selection's applied. And you can do this with any selection tool in Photoshop. So make a selection, it's right over here. If you need it to be on your face, hold down that spacebar key, and you can move it while you're actually making that selection. That's going to help out a ton whenever you guys are doing this sort of thing. Okay, so we have our selection tools, our elliptical and our rectangular marquee. Very, very helpful whenever we're doing anything in Photoshop. I use selection tools all the time. Okay, now let's say we wanted to just duplicate her head to a new layer. Maybe we want to make like a little sticker or something like that, and we just want this area there. But we're going to click on our background layer, and I have my selection active. Let's just move it down just a little bit. I have my selection active. I'm going to hit Control or Command J. That's going to duplicate this on a new layer. But if I'm in a selection, the only thing it's going to duplicate is whatever's in the selection. So while the selection's active, you're only going to be affecting that selection. So Control or Command J will duplicate that layer, and then now I need to do something with it. Maybe I want to move it around, maybe I want to size it, things like that. So we're going to move on to our next tool, which is the Move tool. All right, and the Move tool is, I would say, as far as commonly used tools in Photoshop goes, if I had like a Venn diagram, you know, like a pizza chart, like 60% of it would be like the Move tool and the Brush tool, and everything else would make up like little bitty slices. So Move tool and Brush tool, that's like, if you got the Move tool and the Brush tool down, you're pretty good. So we're going to spend a little bit more time on those because those two are incredibly important. Okay, Move tool. So basically, with the Move tool, you can click anywhere in your image and drag around. You don't have to be right on your actual layer, whatever it is. So you can move it around. Now, at this point, you're like, okay, why is that important? All you do is move things around. Well, built into the Move tool is the Transform tool, and that is very, very important. So the Transform tool basically allows me to transform this layer into just about anything that I want. So there are a couple ways to get to the Transform tool within the Move tool. First way is to just have this checked up at the top that says Show Transform Controls. So if that's checked, you can see I have a little bounding box right around here. And then it's really simple to make any adjustments I need. I can just click on any one of these corners and start adjusting my layer. I can click right outside and I can start rotating my layer as well. There we go. Now if I want to move any one of these corners individually, I've got some keyboard shortcuts that are going to help out. We can hold down the Control or the Command key and click on any one of these corners and move them out, and we can actually work on changing things like perspective and scale and sizing. And for the last little guy we're going to cover here in the Transform tool, we're going to right click and I'm going to go down to Warp, which is going to actually allow me to warp and move around some of these pixels in my image. So similar, if you guys have seen the Liquify tool, this is similar to the Liquify tool. It creates a grid in your image and allows you to like push and pull pixels around, which is very, very helpful. All right, cool. We're going to hit that checkbox and we're going to move on to our tools. We've got about 4 minutes left in this segment. Okay, so our marquee selection tool and our move tool, we're looking pretty good. Now our lasso tool, it's basically like a free-form marquee tool. So if I wanted a selection around her face, I can use my lasso tool. If it doesn't need to be a perfect circle, whatever, that's totally okay. Oftentimes, a selection like that around someone's arm is all you need. You don't have to go in and get the perfect selection for every single thing you do. Just sometimes a pretty good selection is just fine. So I recommend using the lasso tool for that. The magic wand tool is incredibly powerful. This tool is going to select anything that's similar to wherever you click. So let's say I click on her dress. It's basically going to select everything that looks like her dress in the image. Now we have a lot of options for this tool. The first and most important one is going to be our tolerance. If we bring our tolerance up, so let's say right now we're at 40. If I go to 80 and hit enter, now if I click on her dress, it's going to select more of her dress. So it's going to select more of a similar color wherever you click. I can hold down the Shift key a couple times. There we go. And that's going to continue to add to that selection. So if I wanted to select out this red door, I can click there. It's selecting pretty much all that red in that door. If I were to bring my tolerance down to something like 20 and click in the same place, it's only going to select part of that door. So for instance, if I wanted to change the color of this door, I could turn that into a selection really quick. I can grab a hue saturation adjustment layer, and I could change the hue of that door. I could do that very, very quickly just using the magic wand tool, making a selection, and then changing the hue there. All right, well, you'd want it to look a little bit better than that, but for a quick example, that's exactly what selections are for. They're selecting out part of your image and then changing those, whether it's lightening, darkening, changing the colors, whatever you have it. Okay, we have our eyedropper tool, which this is built into the brush tool. So if you're using the brush tool, which we're going to get to in just a second, hold down the Alt or the Option key and it'll turn into the eyedropper. So I never go over here and just click on the eyedropper tool because I'm always in the brush tool anyway. Remember, it's part of that 60% of things you use all the time in Photoshop. So hold Alt or Option, you can sample colors, and I can get that red from her lips, and I could paint that, if I wanted to. I could create a new layer, and I could put that same exact red from her lips. There we go. I could put that as fingernail polish if I wanted to. All right, do a very quick job. Dun, 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 dun. And then we need, bam. It looks real. There we go. All right, so there's the idea. Select a color, you can paint in an area, and fingernail polish, done. All right, next we're gonna move on to our, we've got a healing brush tool here. We're gonna be going into healing brush tool and clone stamp tool. It's got its own section, so we're just gonna go very briefly right now. Basically what a healing brush tool will allow you to do is get rid of blemishes, things like that. So I can sample this place right up here, paint over there, and it's gonna completely get rid of my blemish. So healing brush tool will blend things together. Clone stamp tool does basically the exact same thing, but it's a direct copy. So clone stamp tool, instead of wanting to blend, so if I sample over here and start painting over here, you're gonna see it's a different color and it's not gonna blend this back together. So sample over here, let's paint over here, it's a little bit darker. you're going to see it's just a direct copy there, okay? Whereas if I use the healing brush tool and sampled over here, it would actually take the texture from the area I sampled and the color from the area that I'm painting. So when I let go, they're going to blend together very, very well. So healing brush is for blending, clone stamp is for direct copy. All right, and the last one we're going to cover is our brush tool. Now this tool, I spend a lot of time in here. The reason is I spend a lot of time using layer masks in Photoshop. And the brush tool combined with layer masks, very, very, very helpful. So a couple quick tips for using the brush tool. First tip, we have our brush tool. Let's just choose a regular edge brush there, okay? What we're gonna do is I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna show you guys that we have a bunch of different options that come default into Photoshop. I just recommend using a soft round brush most of the time. Okay, you can change your size and hardness right here with the brush tool, but the easiest way to do this, and this is a great tip, hold down the Control and the Option key. If you hold down Control and Option at the same time, you can click on your image and drag left and right, and this is going to make your image, this is going to make your brush larger and smaller. If I drag up and down, you can see my hardness right there on my screen. My hardness is increasing and decreasing by dragging up and down. So really quickly, I can drag left and right to make my brush larger and harder or softer at the same time. Now, why is this helpful? Let's say I wanted to get rid of this detail right there, okay? This is just, let's say this was a little bit distracting. Well, we don't want to paint with like a soft edge black brush right there, right? Like that's going to cover our subject. That doesn't look good. What I need is a smaller brush that's a little bit has harder edge. So we're going to drag this to the left and then drag this down. So we have a small hard edge brush now, and I can just paint black, which I hold Alt or Option to sample that color. I just paint black right there, and there we go. I've just taken away all the detail from that area, helping to draw more attention to my subject. So a very simple way in which you can just use a brush tool, nothing complicated here, but instead of having a brush that does like this, very quickly, hold Control and Option, drag to the left and down to go harder, and there we go. You can totally take care of that. And on a PC, I believe it is Alt and Control and right click. And maybe someone in the chat room can double check that for me, because I haven't used a PC in a while. On it. All right, cool. And then if you do decide you have something you don't like in your image, you can use your eraser tool to get rid of that thing. But that's pretty much it for our commonly used tools. So these other guys down here at the bottom, blur tool, things like that, pen tools, helpful. But to start off with, I would recommend sticking up here in this top block of 6 or 8 tools. You'll be in pretty good shape.